The soft hum of church bells filled the cool Boston air as mourners gathered outside the historic St. Cecilia Church. It was a day heavy with emotion, a day that marked the end of an era for the Kennedy family. Draped in solemn silence and sorrow, the public funeral of Joan Bennett Kennedy drew friends, family, and admirers from across the nation. But amid the crowd of dignitaries and familiar faces, all eyes turned toward one man, Patrick Kennedy, her devoted son, whose tearful goodbye left the world in silence. For decades, Joan Kennedy had stood as a graceful figure in American history, known not just as the former wife of Senator Ted Kennedy, but as a woman of intelligence, dignity, and resilience. Her charm had once illuminated Washington's most glamorous circles, yet her quiet strength in later years earned her even deeper respect. Now, as the church doors opened for her final farewell, her son Patrick walked behind her casket, eyes downcast, his face carrying the pain of both loss and gratitude. The air inside the church felt sacred, almost suspended in time. The scent of lilies filled the space as the choir softly sang Ave Maria. Patrick Kennedy, dressed in a black suit and holding a single white rose, took his place at the front pew alongside close family members. Caroline Kennedy and other relatives from the extended clan sat nearby, united in grief but holding the same quiet composure that the family has long been known for. When it was Patrick's turn to speak, the crowd fell utterly silent. Standing at the podium, he took a deep breath, his voice trembling as he began. "My mother was more than a Kennedy," he said, pausing to control his emotion. "She was my guiding light, my friend, and the person who taught me that grace is not something you wear. It's something you live." His words echoed through the vast church, and for a moment, even the sound of rustling paper stopped. Patrick's tribute was not just a eulogy. It was a son's love letter to the woman who had shaped his heart. He recalled childhood memories of sailing trips on Cape Cod, long conversations at night, and her quiet encouragement during his struggles with addiction and public life. "She never gave up on me," he continued, his eyes glistening. "Even when I stumbled, she believed I could stand again. Her love saved me more than once." The audience, made up of old friends, journalists, and political figures, sat visibly moved. For many, Joan Kennedy represented an age of American elegance, a woman of faith and courage who carried herself with quiet pride through public scrutiny, personal battles, and years of illness. Her story was one of resilience, and Patrick's words seemed to capture that perfectly. As the service continued, the choir's hymns blended with the muffled sobs of those seated in the pews. A framed photo of Joan, smiling softly with her signature poise, rested beside the casket. It was a reminder of the woman who had once been at the center of American politics, yet had chosen a life of reflection and dignity in her later years. Senator Ted Kennedy's legacy often overshadowed her own, but those who truly knew Joan understood her quiet influence on the family. She was the foundation of grace in the Kennedy home, the one who held faith close even when life grew dark. Her musical background as a trained pianist had filled the Kennedy home with warmth and melody, and Patrick fondly mentioned how she would sit at the piano during holidays, her fingers dancing gently across the keys while the family gathered around. "Those were the moments," Patrick said softly, "when love felt like music." Outside the church, the crowd waiting along the street stretched for blocks. People carried white roses and American flags, whispering prayers as they watched the funeral procession unfold. For many, Joan Kennedy was a symbol of enduring strength, a reminder that behind every great name lies a story of quiet struggle and human depth. As the ceremony drew to a close, the priest spoke of Joan's faith, how she leaned on prayer and forgiveness even in her most difficult years. "She carried her cross with serenity," he said, "and today she walks into eternal peace." With those words, the congregation rose to its feet in a final moment of reverence. Patrick approached the casket once more, placed his rose atop it, and whispered something only he could hear. His shoulders trembled and tears finally fell freely down his face. Outside, the sound of bagpipes filled the air as pallbearers carried the casket out of the church. The Kennedy family followed closely, their faces hidden behind dark glasses, their grief palpable. Patrick held on to his wife's hand as they descended the steps together, the crowd watching in profound silence. The moment felt deeply personal, yet undeniably public, an echo of what it means to be part of the Kennedy legacy. The procession made its way to the family burial site at St. Francis Xavier Cemetery, where generations of Kennedys now rest. The scene there was serene. Golden autumn leaves fell gently over the graves, the wind whispering through the tall trees. A small group gathered for the final prayer, their voices low and steady. Patrick stepped forward once more, kneeling by his mother's resting place. "Goodbye, Mom," he whispered, placing his hand on the polished wood. "I'll carry you with me forever." Those who stood nearby could not hold back their tears. For all the fame and history surrounding the Kennedys, this was not about politics or legacy. It was about a son losing his mother and the deep ache that loss leaves behind. Patrick lingered there for several minutes, his head bowed, before standing to embrace his relatives one by one. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, the final notes of the bagpipes faded into the distance. The family slowly began to leave, their faces etched with grief, but also peace. Reporters kept a respectful distance, capturing the moment quietly, aware that history was witnessing the end of another Kennedy chapter. In the days following the funeral, messages of condolence poured in from across the world. Former presidents, senators, and countless admirers paid tribute to Joan's legacy of grace and perseverance. "She was a woman of quiet courage," one statement read, "who faced life's trials with faith and kindness." Patrick Kennedy later released a heartfelt message to the public, thanking everyone for their support. "My mother's life was not defined by her struggles," he wrote, "but by her strength to rise above them. She taught me that compassion and forgiveness are the true marks of greatness. I will honor her by living with that same spirit." As Boston returned to its usual rhythm, the image of Patrick Kennedy's tearful farewell remained in the nation's memory. It was not just the goodbye of a public figure. It was the farewell of a son who had found healing in love, forgiveness, and remembrance. Joan Kennedy's story, once entwined with politics and fame, now found its most beautiful expression in her son's tears, a testament to the quiet power of a mother's heart. And though her piano will never play again, the melody of her life still lingers, in her son's voice, in the family's memories, and in the hearts of those who saw her not just as a Kennedy, but as a woman who lived with grace until her final breath. As Patrick Kennedy left the cemetery, he looked back one last time, his eyes filled with both sorrow and peace. The wind brushed gently against his face, and for a moment, it felt as if the world itself whispered farewell. Joan Bennett Kennedy may have left this world, but her love, her elegance, and her quiet strength continue to echo through the halls of history, and through the heart of her son, who said goodbye not just with words, but with tears that spoke louder than any eulogy ever could.